Hello, and welcome to the Imaginary Movie Podcast, the podcast where we self-indulgently congratulate ourselves for doing something for a long time. That's right, it's the 300 episode spectacular. My name's Sam, and I'm joined by none other than my esteemed colleague, David. Dave, how are we doing?
Welcome to the 300th annual Monty Burns Achievement for Outstanding Achievement in the Field of Excellence.
Well done. Good.
And that's us. I think I mashed that a bit at the beginning, but I got there.
It's good enough. It's good enough. And you know, in the spirit of papering over the cracks of mediocrity, here we are doing exactly that, and we've been continuously doing that for the last.
Speaking of bang average mediocrity,
yeah.
Welcome. I want to address something just before we get into the 300th episode. Congratulations. I was watching Anchorman the other day, and I was struck by the opening sort of like it's the news team and they're walking around smiling, and you sort of like loads of TV shows have that, like that. Oh, it's the opening credits and it's the gang walking around looking cool or smiling.
Yeah.
Where every time our intro music is playing, we are yawning, we are rubbing our eyes, we are slapping ourselves awake. And I've noticed it especially in the last 3 or 4 months. It's like that. Today was especially like if you're watching on YouTube. I think this will be on YouTube. Like we are tired. We are tired.
It's because, Dave, you know, we as much as we are the consummate professionals, we're also we're coming in from we had work today. You know, we've got shit to do.
I've got to go to work tomorrow.
I've got to go to work tomorrow. Exactly. It's a ridiculous reality that we can't just quit our jobs and do this full time. Let's just imagine a world where we could sit and watch movies and talk about them all day long. Imagine how quickly we'd turn into some kind of Joe Rogan right-wing hate fest. It would take seconds.
I think we need a modicum of success for that. I think if we continue to be unknown and unsuccessful and unlistened to, I think we'll be okay. I think it's the money and the power. First you get the power,
then you get
first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the
sugar.
Women. And you see almost by the end of that sentence, Sam, I have collapsed into being way more misogynistic than I was 5 minutes ago.
I told you it happened.
You see what I mean? That's how quickly it can happen. It's a real.
It's been an outrageous descent into madness, but here we are. So yeah, we're here today because congratulations to us. We have managed to record and publish. I think it's actually more than 300 episodes, but let's not worry about that. 300
We have
episodes.
arbitrarily picked this as our 300th episode extravaganza.
Just like
sorry.
Yeah, just like the 138th episode spectacular. So there's a little bit of a Simpsons reference in there for the knowledgeable fans. We've done 300 episodes, and so what we're going to do, we are going to self-congratulate. And if only we had a panel of celebrities and guests we could call in, you know, in intervals to really cement how fantastic we are, just to kind of talk up our success, our achievement, our handsome appearance.
We're not making a podcast about a sitcom we starred in for our own edification, all right? We're going to have to continue to subsist on the scraps of that one time someone commented on our Twitter post telling us off for getting facts wrong on a Sharp episode. And that's it. That's our entire. That is the summation of our entire outreach.
Cultural impact. You see, what I always come back to is the very. I think it's impressive. It might just be bleak. Is that the most viewed thing that this podcast network has ever produced is a mashup I made in about half an hour of all the Star Trek themes playing at the same time. Google it, all the Star Trek themes at once.
I have to play that at your funeral. It's got really...
Please do.
Your wife's
it's
not
got some
happy.
Something like 12,000 views, which far surpasses, but in order of magnitude, anything that we've ever produced in audio form. So I think that's the spirit of just random hits, and one day we might actually make something that has some kind of cultural impact, but up until that point we'll carry on podcasting.
Yeah, if only one of us could produce something, Sam, that would go on and, you know, be their legacy. If only there was something that could, I can't think of anything,
No, well, like children or something. Nah, no, that'll never
Not your
happen.
children. With you as their
No.
dad. Come on, Sam.
No, they got no
You only
chance.
have so much.
So what we're going to do, we're going to ramble away through this as usual. We are going to enjoy this self-congratulation.
Have you got any? Have you got any wistful music, Sam? Like no 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 no.
I don't have wistful music. I can play you some of the random music that we've got on the free audio library and see what fits. You know, we can go kind of. No, it's not really hitting, is it? I do like having some kind of new music, something to bring that we can freshen up. So that might be
I want
something
to have
we
a
do.
walk down memory lane, Sam, when we started doing this podcast in the heights of COVID, when we weren't allowed to go outside, and we were obviously all mentally very, very well when we made the decision to start doing the podcast.
It was a great time.
Great
brilliant.
time, fantastic.
It was brilliant. Yeah.
And so, imagine that we're playing some wistful music. And so, firstly, Lost Episodes was our very first episode. I can't remember whether it was Blank Check.
I think it might be Blank Check, the movie where a kid. It's like Richie. It's the Richie Rich dual movie, isn't it? The one that came out at the same time. That's not Richie Rich. It is pretty terrible. So that's
yes, and features a 25-year-old woman tongue kissing an 11-year-old.
Good stuff. Good.
But no, that was the Lost
Disney
episode,
stuff.
and probably for the best. But we also did. I noticed this. We did a National Treasure commentary that I either didn't record or we lost, and then we did it again a year later. I noticed on our feed.
Pure stupidity. It's a bit like all podcasts, isn't it? We're 300 episodes in now. The listener might say your quality hasn't improved up to this point, but my point would be that
I would challenge that listener to go back and listen to Sister Act and then tell me we haven't improved.
Yeah, there's some progress, but like the first 100 episodes of any podcast might be just they're still figuring it out, and I guess we're still figuring it out now. But I do think that we have, as much as this is a stupid thing, 300 episodes. All of these movies, all of these TV shows, all of this content that we've produced, and I think I'm impressed. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to start off, and I'm going to give you the floor, Dave. I want you to just talk about one of the movies that we've done. I haven't listened back to any of the previous episodes that these movies are about. I don't know if you have, but maybe the listener might want to like, comment, subscribe. Link in the description. I don't know. That's up to you. And
yeah, get some more views on Muppet Treasure Island. I mean.
Yeah,
it can just become the Muppet Treasure Island podcast.
Yeah. So tell us about your first movie. Let's start off this self-congratulation.
So, true to form, you gave me a specification for this episode where I was to pick 3 movies that I wanted to talk about from the podcast. So obviously, I've picked about 15.
Yeah, you've ignored it as usual. Yes,
I have ignored. I've ignored it. The first one I want to talk about, to be fair. There's a couple of movies we've done where, and only a couple because we're the same person, where we've really been at cross purposes in the episode, and it kind of makes for the most difficult podcast, I think, is when one of us really likes a movie and one of us really dislikes a movie, and it's so rarely happened. And the one where I think I've written in my notes, High Rise, you fucking Philistine, full stop.
High Rise.
Which is an adaptation of a J.G. Ballard book, which is directed by Ben Wheatley.
2015.
Which is an excellent movie, and I won't be argued with here. I can understand why it's not your cup of tea, but I really feel like you and Joe keel-hauled me a bit in that episode for making you watch that. And
I think it was actually
that's slightly unfair.
I think it was actually Ross. I don't think it was Joe.
There's no way Ross watched High Rise. Come on now.
He did. I'm telling you, he did. I'm pretty sure it's Ross. But the point being, High Rise, it's like one of those weird movies it's kind of like an arty movie. It's kind of like not pushed too far in that direction, but there is something. And I think actually from memory, I didn't hate that movie. I maybe sat in the middle between Ross, who absolutely did hate it, and you, who's an art house wanker, who will sit and watch, a 4-hour black and white movie of a curtain blowing in the wind and just being like,
yeah, pitch off stretch.
Yes,
absolutely.
this is really this is really spectacular. This is an absolute.
Just watch
this is,
Orson Welles eating orange for an hour. Great.
Yeah,
That's
I
my
think
evening.
I think so. So there is, and I actually looking, going through the some of the movies that we've done, some of the previous movies, I think we do tend to go for maybe some of the more obvious films, some of the films where we're like, it's a maybe a bit more saleable, but like action movies, and we can't help ourselves in a lot of ways. But then you do get into those odd films. Recently, I'm thinking of we did Poor Things, which is a fucking strange movie, and like there's something really enjoyable about doing films like that. High Rise, I think, is a good example of a movie where you can watch it, not necessarily enjoy it, but it still has an impact on you. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the type of movie.
Sort of movie, and we have done a few of these where, like, for not that it's clever, but it's just a little bit more challenging than your sort of standard A to B to C movie plot. Like, as much as we love those movies. Like, I'm sure we'll bring some of them up, like really traditional 3-act movies, but sometimes you just want that a little bit more expansive, David Lynchy sort of like weird. It's just thought provoking and kind of entertaining to watch, and sort of leaves you with a taste rather than it being a. My mother is always very much a. Oh well, what's the ending? And I'm like, well, no, that's not really the point. Kind of like it's. To paraphrase children's TV, it's about the friends we made along the way.
Yeah.
Like I am not really big into like having an ending and knowing these characters are going to be happy and things. No, that's not really what I'm doing. I want to be entertained for 2 hours. I don't want to slog through a movie for 2 hours and then fucking to find out that John got that job he wanted. Like, I think it depends where you're coming at from movies. And Ross, certainly, our dear departed friend Ross, don't worry, he's not dead. We've just deported him back to Ireland. Our dear friend, departed friend Ross. Brexit, yes, get rid of all these immigrants.
Oh no, the right wing thing happens already. Oh god.
You see,
even without the
bit
success,
of self-actualized power. But the thing I think Ross always found on the podcast was Ross, I think, sits much more in that mainstream kind of like 3-act structure movie where he kind of wants that closure. I think is the word. Like,
you're saying he's stupid. You're saying
no, not at all, Sam. I'm just saying that, like, you have to be an artsy wanky. You have to kind of be like, sniffing your own farts a bit to enjoy a movie like High Rise, where your average moviegoer is going to go and be like, what the fuck?
Not everything can be Gladiator, can it? Not everything can be.
I tell you what can be, though. Gladiator.
Go on then.
And Gladiator coming to cinemas soon.
I know, Gladiator 2.
Ridley Scott, pay us, you old fuck.
It's ridiculous. So another movie that kind of is similar to High Rise, in the same vein anyway. It's a movie that I have a kind of. What kind of? It's a movie about the human condition and existentialism, and how do we connect with other people in the world, and what are we gonna? How are we gonna forge?
Can I go guess what movie you're about?
Well, yeah. How can we guess? How can we forge our way in life, and what do the transient relationships that we have mean to us? And that movie, Dave, is.
See, I was going to say Children of Men, but now I'm questioning that.
Oh, it's close, but it's not it's not close in any way whatsoever. It's Lost in Translation. Lost in Translation.
Yes, that you're right, Sam. That does not have a lot in common with Clive Owen's Children of Men.
No, but this is 2003 movie directed by nepotism Sofia Coppola, and. and this is a movie I have a bit of a trouble.
So, I mean, if it's nepotism that gets us female directors, I mean, like,
and she's pretty good. This is a good movie, but I think when we watched this, we really did. We did praise it a lot, but we also had the awkward conversation in that, is this movie kind of racist? And I think probably, the further away we get from 2003. The more that we're going to be like, yeah, it's kind of racist and we can't really enjoy it because this is like Orientalism turned up to max. We've got all the Japanese people in this movie are there for Bill Murray and us as the audience to laugh at, and so there's like this weird. But no, I think it is. I think
I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying that kind of like. And I hate to always be the guy defending, these movies, but I think it's kind of the point of the movie is that these Japanese people don't give a fuck about what these white people are up to, like, and that so they kind of exist in a little bubble outside of that because
yeah, maybe
the people in Tokyo don't give a fuck, like the people in the restaurants and things. They're not fawning over them and all of that. It's just kind of like existing.
It certainly reflects
it's always the tricky thing with having a movie starring basically just white people take place in Tokyo.
Yeah, I think it does.
There.
I think that does in itself reflect some of the issue, and maybe having maybe having instead of Scarlett Johansson, we have perhaps a Japanese character who could fill that role. Like, but anyway, so there's this trouble relationship I have, but then still, because I really, really love that movie. It's a movie that I think connects in so many different ways, and it leaves you with the same kind of weirdness, even if it is slightly kind of more in that high rise, like, what are we doing here? We're going to have lots of slow panning shots of the Tokyo skyline. We're going to have, really some really interesting framing, but it's really nice to do movies like this. And I think I was reflecting on it recently about movies that make you feel uncomfortable, movies that make you that don't have that narrative structure. And actually, it's about like the human experience. It's about connecting what the director thinks and what they're trying to get across, and the magic of you watching a movie and understanding that through the visual, through the audio, through the story, but often without that. Like, that's an amazing thing. Like, movies are amazing, and we've not been doing this very long. We're 100 years, really.
Yeah, sometimes it's about vibes with a movie. Sometimes a movie, the content can be, and I'm not saying Lost in Translation is this at all, but sometimes I think the content of a movie can be quite superfluous to the visual thing that you're being presented with, and sometimes you can just really enjoy looking at a movie enough, for various reasons that kind of like the inconsistencies and silly things about the plot become kind of irrelevant, and even the ending, it becomes more about the experience of watching the movie.
Yeah, the feeling that you're left with, which I think
Lost in Translation definitely has like a really interesting kind of melancholic vibe to it, which I really like. Yeah, it's also one of the lowest stakes movies I've ever seen in my entire life, which I also really, really enjoy. No one's dying in this movie. No one's getting divorced. No one's having an argument. Like, it's just, these two people like kind of shuffling around Tokyo, with the little idiosyncrasies. It's nice. Amazing,
really. So let's. Where do you want to go next? Have you got a seamless segue that's going to bring, or shall I just slam something completely different?
I've got a little bit of a question, and obviously I'm surprising you a bit here because I didn't ask you previously to think about this. What's the worst movie we've done for the podcast?
The worst movie.
You can define that however you like.
The worst movie. I think that's a tough question, because I think we have done a lot of movies that I think you would call like poor, that you would look at
a lot of bad movies.
Yeah, look on Rotten Tomatoes and go, but like, this is the one with the lowest score, or it's almost like definition of what is bad. What is it? Something that is it the feeling that it leaves with you? Is it the taste that's left in your mouth? One of the ones for me that I just really, really disliked was the Kingsman, which I know is a slightly controversial view, because that is relatively well considered, and I think maybe you enjoyed it a little bit more than I do from memory. But that's one of those movies that I don't know if it's the worst movie we've done, but it's a movie that I just spent the whole time being frustrated with, and I thought the messaging, because it's quite a right wing movie. There's like it's quite a retrograde. It's not very progressive, and it's kind of like in the way that it's telling its story and the story itself. And so I just left I left frustrated by what was left on the table and actually what a movie like that could have been, because it kind of reflected a movie of a different age, of a bygone age. You know, the old James Bond movies, which are...
It feels like a 2004 movie, I would say, and I think it's sort of 2014, 15 sort of.
Yeah, something like that.
But
yeah.
it feels like a movie from 10 years earlier. Like you said, there's a kind of a theme of toxic masculinity that runs through a lot of that movie. They don't go very far to debunk. I'm glad you went with something like that, Sam, because I'm going to. My answer is going to mimic your reasoning almost exactly. Now, I toyed with Stop or My Mum Will Shoot, which is arguably one of the worst movies on almost any metric you can imagine that we've watched for the podcast. However, it kind of veers into so bad it's good territory.
Yes, that is an interesting. So this is 1992, where it's Sylvester Stallone and his mother,
Estelle Getty.
Yes, played by Estelle Getty. I mean, this is 14%.
Do you know what, Sam? We're talking about it, and I actually think I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the process of watching that and doing the podcast about it. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. The worst movie I think we've done was Will Smith's The Pursuit of Happiness, which was one of the most dull, upsetting, aggravating, and insulting movies I think I've ever watched. This is the Will Smith kind of like dramatic movie where he sells X-ray machines or something, and it's basically the movie is about him and his son being homeless because his ego won't let him take a fucking 9-to-5 job to not be homeless, because he must become an investment banker or a lawyer or something. It's
the end of the movie.
It's one of the most upsetting messages in a movie, because on the one hand, it feels like a really real and raw look at, like, you know, how like homeless families and
like harrowing
don't
poverty.
See a lot in movies, and that's really sharp and I think well observed. But then the underlying plot of this irresponsible, horrible prick of a father who will not sacrifice his own need to be rich, which is basically the thing. It's just this arch capitalist thing of like, if you work hard and sacrifice everything and don't give a fuck about your family, like, you'll succeed. And it's such an upsetting, aggravating message for all that it's actually quite well made and well cast and the performances are good. But I just think that the inception of it is so... It really grated with me. And maybe it's just I'm too working class to watch a movie like that and be like, it's too bootstrappy, it's too fucking...
It's
mixed
a real...
with the very real horror of Will Smith barricading himself in the bathroom of a train station or something with his son so they have somewhere to sleep at night.
That's such a specific and haunting part of that movie. He's got his foot on the door, hasn't he? He's lying on the floor and his son's trying to sleep. And I think, I think the reason that movie is so affecting in a bad way is because you have the grounded reality of American poverty. And a scene like that, it's very, very small. It's a very small situation, but it's terrifying. And I think the terror that the movie elicits from you is then shat on, because the whole point of the movie is that at the end, he gets the job, but we don't ever ask the question of, is this like, what about all the other Will Smiths who are out there, having to deal with the horrors of this world? Are we going to do anything structurally or systematic to solve this problem?
Is that this fucking rich prick who runs this investment firm or whatever it is, like, is benevolent because he gives Will Smith this unpaid internship that's 80 hours a week. And you're like, how is that the resolution? How is that the resolution to this horrible situation you find yourself in because of society's ills, because there's no social safety net, and and because you're a single black father in the city in America? Like, that's a really, really strong, important message there that's utterly skewed by the fact that the resolution is like, and now I'm rich, so I'm going to go and piss on poor people. Fuck you.
Yeah, it's a real... I think it really does lean into our political roots. But you know what? This is what films...
It's just an upsetting movie that's not... Like, I enjoy watching not enjoy, but like I think it's important to watch scenes like that, and I can imagine a version of that movie where it will be uplifting, or at least kind of like important to throw light on something that maybe lots of people aren't aware of. You know,
Yeah.
and that bathroom scene especially, I think, is really, really poignant and well done. But when it's rolled up in the message of like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're not
Hey,
working hard enough.
I did it, and so can you, and
Mm.
that's statistically not the case. That's always the problem. So that's, I think, so two movies that are kind of going at the same thing. But I think probably what you mentioned about Stop or My Mum Will Shoot is that actually a lot of movies do push really, really well into this is actually really, really bad, but it's so bad that I love it. One example, and I will defend this
No
movie.
idea what you're going to say.
I know there could be anything. I'll defend this movie, and I did in episode 191. Is 1998's action spectacular Matthew Broderick powerhouse that is Godzilla, and this is a movie.
Matthew Broderick movie.
I mean, it's a fairly low bar. I think Ferris Bueller might be the one that tops it, but this is a movie that's poor. This is a movie. It's a good film. This is a movie that is objectively poor and is confused and is probably overly long and doesn't really have like many redeeming features. But I think we've talked about this. We have this phrase, the cold light of podcasting. When you are when you are watching a movie, it's one thing, but when you're watching a movie to talk about it, you are thinking about the things that we can talk about. So make some notes, or even just have a bit of a mental picture in your head. And this is a movie that's just like it's a sprawling mess, and it's I think it really pushes into, it's so bad it's good, but it's also
Still
like
bad.
it's still bad. It's still bad, and I have to acknowledge that. And yet, despite this, because of the way it makes me feel, because of the emotion and the 90s nostalgia, let's not lie, this is a movie that I love, and I can't wait to watch it with my kids, because I think it'll be a movie they love, unironically, because they're too young to know any better. And that's the advantage of being able to indoctrinate your children with these terrible movies from a young age.
Yeah, that's a good place to be. Yeah, we've done a lot of crap movies. We've also done, I think, some really good movies. And I mean that in all shapes and sizes. And so I was trying to think, what's the best movie we've done?
The best movie.
And I was having a look, and we've done some really good ones. We did Fellowship of the Rings, which is easily one of my top 5 favourite movies ever. But it wasn't. I think I had to factor in kind of like, we've done a lot of movies, and I think the ones that stick with me on the podcast are usually the ones that I've seen for the first time for the podcast, where it kind of like, especially when I'm not expecting it to be really good, where it strikes me that, wow, this is an excellent movie, and where has it been missing in my life? And so there's two. I'm going to cheat here because I literally just can't narrow it down. There are two movies that I think kind of like I couldn't really decide between. And the first one was 1931's All Quiet on the Western Front, which I think, in a very somber way, nerd, on all Best Pictures, kind of like a sub-feed. It's such a phenomenal movie that's so relevant even today, and it's like, just wait 8 years, guys, and then we're going to have another war in Europe because we didn't learn anything from this movie or the actual war we had 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think that's a reasonably recent episode, so hopefully not too heinous in terms of our presentation or our ability to present a podcast. But really, really excellent. And then I'll let you come in a minute, Sam. And the other end of the spectrum, and this is kind of like, this is just the. I've watched this movie 6-7 times since we watched it for the podcast. It's Scream, the original Scream. Really caught me in a way that I wasn't expecting it to, like, easily become one of my favorite movies. Like,
because
the minute
you
I
hadn't
watched
seen
it,
that.
I wanted to watch it again. I hadn't seen it.
You hadn't seen, which is surprising. It's, listen, it's quite difficult to find.
Man, I was a really scared kid. I didn't like scary movies as a kid.
No, but it's
a movie called Scream, Sam.
It's hard.
I'm a little scared kid.
It's hard to find movies that Dave hasn't seen. It's hard to find movies where, and most of them are boring economic movies that I subjected.
Black and white 1930s noir movies,
Yeah, well, there's a range, but yeah, Scream is one of those great, like, actually, this is actually good. what? Because it is a parody in so many ways. It is aping all of the horror movies that we have seen or that have planted themselves in the cultural consciousness, but it's also doing something new and fresh, and
it doesn't shit the bed in the third act. So many
yes.
parodies shit the bed in
Yes.
the Last Action Hero shits the bed in the really shits the bed as well.
Oh,
like in Train
yes.
Spotting shits the bed. You know,
Yes.
like so many parodies. The first two acts are really good and tight, and then it kind of lose their way, and they just end up becoming the thing they're parodying. And I think Scream is clever enough throughout, and you know, and that Drew Barrymore section at the front of the movie, I think I've watched on YouTube like 20 times. It's an excellent movie in of itself.
It's as good an opening as
it doesn't start anyone who's in any of the rest of the movie.
Yes.
It's fucking brilliant.
It's a good as opening to a movie as I think the aforementioned Fellowship of the Ring is, where you get that lovely, concise, you know, first even just the prologue into the stuff in Hobbiton, like just beautiful, concise, great. Everything's there for you, and it's so tightly told in terms of the storytelling. And I think definitely Scream is up there in like being able to capture a vibe, capture that feeling, capture the essence of what all these movies are, and you're so right about the third act. They managed to create something new as well. Like the end of the movie manages to elevate itself above the thing that it's parodying, because it's a pastiche, isn't it? It's trying.
It's an amazing parody, but it's also a really good like slasher movie, and it's kind of difficult to make fun of something while also doing a really good version of that as well. Do you know what I mean? So many. I can't think of a parody that does it as well as this.
No, I think you're right. So good movies then. What was the other one you said?
What's your favourite movies, Sam?
You said 1931's. Yeah, I don't want to go too much into
the
that.
Western Front.
But that is a fantastic movie, and I think the one thing I'd say about that before we move on is that we've watched a fair few movies from before, the invention of
Christ.
Yeah, and a lot of them are pretty shit, and a lot of them really don't hold up, and yet that movie is a great example of where you can see
it could have been made yesterday, and it was. They made it last year.
Yeah, you can see the lines from where we were in 1931 to where we are now. You can see how we've learned, how we've built, and one of the things that I've said. 2 seconds. One of the things I've said multiple times is that I like doing this podcast because I want to learn about film, and I don't have time to go to university and do it. What I do have time for is to once a week sit down and see where a film fits in the timeline of how cinema has developed over the last 120 years. It's a great way of doing that.
Absolutely.
So, one of the films I loved to talk about, and it's a film that another 90s movie, of course, obviously. It's a film that I think really does hold up and has so much to offer on all the fronts: cinematography, storytelling, performances, and it's The Truman Show. I just, one of those movies that I think, it just something just lands with you and just never goes away. It's a film that really holds on, and I think so much of that is because of how it's shot and all of the detail that we get scattered throughout that movie. And I remember talking about it, and I remember just getting so having the conversation was so interesting because we all took away different things from it. We all took away different aspects of that movie that sit down and stay with us as we leave the cinema or leave watching the film. And I think it's hard to appreciate a film like that when you're watching it. Sometimes things can pass you by, but because you've got to do it for a podcast, because you've maybe watched it multiple times again, you sit and notice all the little things. The example being when he's having that one-to-one with his mate on the pier, and just the emotion of that scene.
One of
holy
cinema's
shit,
greatest criminals, the mate from Truman Show.
Yeah. wow, this is a proper movie on top of If I Don't See You, you know, or on all of the lightness and the levity and the weird camera angles and the whole thing. That's
Only
just
thing about the Truman Show that upsets me, I think, is that it kind of showcased the promise that Jim Carrey had as a dramatic actor, blended with his comedic stuff, and we never got it. And that's the only thing that about the Truman Show is that I think Jim Carrey is a generational. We use the term generational in our NFL fandom, but I think Jim Carrey is a generational talent in terms of like screen presence, in terms of like charisma. Like he's an Eddie Murphy type. I really do believe that. I think he like, you know, there's a very short list of people who are that electric on screen, even when they're doing the most abhorrent things, like all those Ace Ventura movies, and to be honest, quite a lot of his filmography from the 90s. And then we had the Truman Show, where he's excellent, doing kind of a lot of his like goofy shtick, but also having like an amazing amount of dramatic chops, and then didn't go on to have more roles like that. I think because Hollywood said, "Now you're the funny guy, do funny stuff."
Yeah, shut up, Jim.
Crawl out of a rhino's anus, like, and that's I think, and then also Jim Carrey's kind of descent into being a bit of a crazy person and starring in some weird movies, and not any specific allegations, but he certainly seems like somebody who hasn't had it all together in the last 20 years. I think the Truman Show maybe marks that kind of departure, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it's a fair comment. It does feel slightly harsh, and I think there are maybe some performances like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and that maybe elevate him slightly above the wackiness that Jim Carrey, like maybe. But I think, to be honest, the Truman Show is such a landmark movie for me because it has captured that. It has captured the essence of why Jim Carrey is actually. I think he's going to be remembered for this movie in a way that maybe does outweigh his serious dramatic chops that, as you've outlined. But goddamn, it's on that list of movies that I could watch, finish, and immediately put on back again, just back to back, because there are just so many. There's so much texture and there's so much to enjoy from a movie like that for me.
Yeah, no.
What else? What else are we?
I was going to say, do we want to do like an honourable mention, maybe just like one more movie you want to talk about, and then maybe wrap this up. We talked about this really, really recently. More people should watch Along Good Friday. I wish I had the music queued up, but I don't.
Yes,
which is
Good Friday.
John Hoskins.
Bob Hoskins.
I was like, John Hopkins? No, that's a hospital. What's wrong with me? Am I having a stroke? Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren as his gangsters mole, and Charlie Fairhair from Casualty, if you're from the UK, and over 25. I say that because he's been on Casualty since he made this movie in the 70s or in the very early 80s, and it's just such a wonderful gangster movie. From like a fairly niche director. It's a British movie. No one seems to have heard of it. That wasn't it.
I'm just trying to bring it in. Sorry, but it never works.
But it's just a wonderful movie, and the music is so good. It's phenomenal. It just.
Yeah,
I mean, name a more iconic theme.
It's brilliant, isn't it? And it's the end. It's the end of that movie. Bring me down. It's the end of that movie, I think, that is what's so fascinating. Because if you haven't listened to our episode, go back and do, because we really get into how the final part of the movie, he's in the back of the car. No spoilers. In the back of the car, and he has this revelation.
Place acting.
And Bob Hoskins manages, with this music playing in the background, manages to run the gamut of emotion, and we go from bemusement to anger, to upset, to fear, to foreboding, unknown, and like nothing changes other than his face. We are on. It's a fixed shot on his face, and I think it's the type of movie that you kind of don't necessarily appreciate why an actor like that is so revered later on in his career. What, you mean the guy who's in like Enemy of the Gates for 20 minutes? Like, what's... But go back, because understand why this man was such an acting legend, and also why this movie should be remembered.
And it's also probably quite high on the list of like, I'd have loved to have been around when this movie came out and been going to the cinema, because like since the Good Friday agreements, the peace agreements in Northern Ireland, which kind of happened when we were kids.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to imagine. Like, there were bombings going on. There were IRA bombings going on the mainland UK. Like, at the time this movie came out, like, there was a London bombing in the early 80s, and there was the Manchester bombing, and
yeah,
like, the fear must have been quite real. So then to have this movie where the bad guys are the IRA, and they are scary, and they are efficient, and they're not like at all. I think the IRA certainly in a lot of more modern movies are quite cartoonish as a, just an Irish version of your stock terrorists. And I don't know, it feels like a real place in time kind of movie, on top of being fantastic and a good watch, and great acting and great script and great theme music. I think it just really is like a page in history kind of movie as well. So there were a lot of movies we watched like that where I'd have really liked to go back and kind of been there on day one, like Fish Called Wanda as well. Like, there's a lot of, for different reasons, there's a lot of movies where I would have liked to kind of, experience that for the first time.
You and mob movies, you're absolutely obsessed. He can't help himself, listener. He just loves any type of mob movie. And
that's the only mob movie I've mentioned. Admittedly, we haven't done tons for the podcast.
It's something we should do, I think, isn't it? It's something we should do. One other honorable mention for me is a bit of a forgotten movie, I think. It's a movie that people... you might have heard of it. You certainly heard of the actors. Bruce Willis, Billy Bob Thornton, Cate Blanchett. But you go, what movie are they in? It's, of course, 2001's crime comedy drama, Bandits. And I think this is a movie that was released in October 2001. And probably ring that bell. That's right. We've mentioned 9/11 once again on this podcast.
Was there something else going on in the autumn of 2001 that will have distracted the American movie-going public from this movie?
Possibly. It certainly lost. It made 67 million off a 75 million budget. It is a movie that I think is long.
It's an excellent movie. It's a really good movie.
It's a good movie. It really is. But for me, it's one of those like touchstone movies that I watched when I was younger, and really, there's just something about it that's.
Why he's into polygamous relationships now. That's not the first time I've made that joke.
I think you made that joke on the episode as well. I think that's a very good joke. It's and the story is about a love triangle, really, isn't it? And about how the sleepover bandits who would Bruce Willis and Billy Bob Thornton, who would go to the bank manager's house the night before, stay with the family, hold them up, go to the bank and say, give us all your money in the morning before anyone else is there. Great stuff, like great idea just for a movie based on that concept. But it's like one of those journey movies. It's a movie that really takes you.
It's definitely a road movie.
It really is. And by the end of it, I think the character development, going from these guys being kind of...
It's about the friends we made along the way, Sam.
I think it's a movie that's forgotten, and I think it's something that really is worth going back to. As much, though, I think also acknowledging that it might be a bit of a flawed movie and there might be ragged elements that don't really connect up. But hey, you like what you like.
Actually, that you mentioned Bandits, and I knew you would. I knew you would when I was going.
You knew I would. I love that movie.
Hey, I love that movie. Maybe not quite as much as you, but we all have our weird idiosyncrasies. There's a reference in that movie to It Happened One Night, the movie we're doing next week.
Is there really?
When Bruce Willis or Billy Bob Thornton, I can't remember, one of them puts a blanket on a string between the beds when they're sharing with Cate Blanchett.
Yes,
that's a huge kind of like plot point in It Happened One Night, the 1934 movie. I just want to kind of like get into our nerd shit right here.
Oh, it's what a beautiful.
I watched that last night and I was like, oh yeah, in Bandits they do that, and I think I can't remember if it's Bruce. I think it's Bruce Willis says, oh, I saw it in an old movie once. And that's a movie from 25 years ago where someone's talking about an old movie that I watched last night, and I was like, yeah, this is fine. This is modern. This is cool.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Isn't it cool?
See what I'm talking about? Connecting up movie history. This is why we're doing the podcast.
That's
it's
what
fantastic.
the podcast is about, isn't it? Because ultimately, we're only human, and ultimately, I want to eat a cheeseburger. I want that MSG. I want those quick calories. I'm going to watch whatever shit Netflix shovels down my throat, basically, like everyone else.
Yeah.
And it's probably not every day of the week that I'm going to, admittedly, I probably skew more on this end of the spectrum. It's not every day of the week I'm going to sit down and watch a 1940s Hitchcock movie. So having the podcast where we schedule it and we say, we're going to watch this movie from the 50s or this movie from the 70s, and it kind of gives you the impetus to say, all right, I'm going to put my analytical brain on and I'm going to watch All the President's Men, or I'm going to watch, Serpico, or I'm going to watch Some Like It Hot, or, these movies that you maybe, on the face of it, you might say, oh, do I have the energy to watch a film that's 50 or 60 years old? And, it just gives you that little bit of a push.
Yeah, it's a good, which is why we'll carry on doing it and never stop. And you can't stop us. Let's
take us off the air, Sam, and we'll just keep compiling it and
take us off the air.
Take us off the air. Yeah. Well, any day now, Sam. Podcasts are going to be restricted to people with. It's going to be like Twitter followers, isn't it? Like you've got to have 4 million Twitter followers. You must be Taylor Swift or more famous in order to have a podcast. So it's only going to be former sitcom stars, famous athletes, and comedians who are allowed podcasts. Oh, and true crime podcasts. Obviously, there's a fucking million of them, and they're fine. But idiots like me and you who are making a podcast for nobody, to nobody, we're gonna be muscled out, I think.
Yeah. And I think unless we pivot, maybe towards a true
to a far right Joe Rogan type podcast.
We could, but maybe true crime might be the way to go. Actually, it could be.
Do you know what?
We could.
There's such a gender.
His name was Dave. He went out one night, but what happened to him? Welcome to the Imaginary True Crime Podcast. Dun dun.
Do you know what my problem, with that, Sam, is? I will watch a million movies, right, about serial killers and be like, oh my God, this is amazing. But then an actual true crime thing about an actual serial killer is a bit like,
it's a bit scary.
I don't like that. Oh, it's a bit exactly. I like the fantasy. I don't necessarily like the reality. And also, isn't it weird that kind of like there's certainly a gender split there, isn't it? Where men, I think, much more like, I want the fantasy, I want the scary movie, and then women, this is not a hard and fast rule, are certainly more like they want the true crime. Your wife, for instance, like
she's
and he cut her eyeballs out, and then he put them in his pants, and then he walked around and did his shopping, and I'm like, oh my fucking God, and they're like, oh yeah, and then what?
Eat the popcorn.
Exactly.
You know what? We've talked about this, and the reason I think Nicola's like, yeah, but I need to be able to understand, because it's like this. What happens if this happens to me, and how would I react? It's like, it's because of deep-seated fear. It's because of fucking because for us it's not a reality, because we don't have to worry about walking home by ourselves, because we're men and we live in a men's world, and fuck it, like we don't have to worry about these things that women do. And I think so much of it comes from it doesn't feel that far away from reality to actually have to face some of these problems,
It's just interesting. It's an interesting way that psychosis kind of like, not psychosis, but that psychology presents itself in that one specific way. Because we're not the only. We're not. I've heard this talked about in other podcasts and other places, that this kind of like phenomenon, and I think you really have summed it up well, based on my knowledge. But it is interesting. So really I don't think I'll be on board with the true crime podcast, Sam. You might have to recast for that.
Okay, well, I'll murder you, and then I can use that. I can farm that content to tell the story of the murder that I committed about you, and that'll be fine.
No, I think Only Murders in the Building did that in season 2. To be fair, so I think
I know that's quite a good joke already, isn't it? That they've already done.
Probably not even the first people. I'm sorry, Sam. Podcasts have been the content of people having podcasts has also been mined for entertainment now.
There is nothing original.
Elon Musk is going to buy Anchor any day now and start charging, and that's it for us.
And start deleting any podcast that he deems unworthy, and ours definitely will hit that. Let's before we finish up, let's do a little bit of speculation about the future, and let's talk about some of the movies that we could do now. Rather than just us list random movies that we like, I thought we could look at the top, the IMDb top 250, and
rather than just list movies we like, we should look at 250 movies right now.
No, we look at some of them. We look at some in the top 10 or so and talk about, because number one remains The Shawshank Redemption, of a movie that I do have a very fond relationship with. It's a film that it's almost like, what are we going to talk about? Like, that's also the challenge of doing this, isn't it? Is that what are we going to actually get into and talk about?
Shawshank is number one on this list.
It's number one. It's always been it's fought with that and The Godfather for a while. Godfather is in number two. Again, another movie that's fantastic, and I haven't seen in a long time. Would be really fun to watch. But again, what can we offer? What new perspectives possibly exist about this absolutely amazing movie?
The top 10. Shawshank Redemption, I reckon we could have a good conversation about that, I think. The Godfather is... Wow, that's a movie that's, 50 years old at this point and steeped in lore. Great movie. The Dark Knight we're actually going to do fairly soon, I think.
Yeah,
we talked
because
about that recently. We did
Batman Begins, and we want to compare. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see if that stays on its pedestal. Godfather Part 2, I'm ramping up. 12 Angry Men, yeah. Schindler's List, absolutely never.
This is the thing.
Ever doing that movie.
This is what I'm getting to. This is the joke that we've had, I think, probably since the first 10 episodes.
Who's joking?
Is that we could never do this movie, and I would be really interested to see how many podcasts have tackled the fucking Holocaust.
Sackable, Sam. I don't know.
It's not sackable. Exactly. This is a non-podcastable movie, because other than we can't be funny about it. I mean, I guess there are probably podcasts who are trying to be funny about Schindler's List, but they certainly are in the Joe Rogan right-wing conspiracy podcast that we are not yet part of, but maybe soon. So maybe when we do Schindler's List, we'll know we've tipped over the edge into that level of...
Yeah, just even more than The Godfather or Shawshank. I don't think we have anything to add.
No.
I think because that's a movie that's good because of such important and unassailable facts.
Yeah.
That what do we have to contribute? It's also 3 hours and 15 minutes. Not that we should ever not watch a movie because it's really long, but...
Hold on. I think that might be one of the foundational principles of this podcast, is it 90 minutes? Yes, we'll do it. If it's more than that, do we have to watch a 91-minute movie?
Speaking of my personal desire for us in the next year, I'd really like to do Once Upon a Time in America. And I say that not as a joke and not as a way to punish you.
It's so long, Dave. It's so long.
But it's really good. It's
I know it's
really good.
I know it's good. Well, I will counter then with...
We watched the fucking Zack Snyder Justice League.
Not for me.
Pipered us into watching a 4-hour cut of that movie.
That was in the dark days of COVID, and you know it. Not for me, but
it just feels like such wasted calories. Like, why would we waste our 4-hour movie shot on that and not watch something good?
A movie that I will then counter with, and this is Mutually Assured Destruction all the way down. Interstellar, I would like to watch 2 hours 49 minutes, but I mean, again, we've maybe talked about the predictability of that Nolan movie being an important movie to me, but there's got to be
banger of a movie. So I think about that movie several times a week. I think
it's just right to the jugular and all the way down. It's, there's so many movies, and this is the joy, isn't it? This is the joy of doing this podcast, is that actually, hell, we can watch movies forever. We will never catch up. We will continue endlessly to watch these films, because it's just like the movies, Dave. It's not about the destination. It's about the friends, me and you, that I guess we've already met you, but still, it's about the friends we meet along the way, and that's what
the movies are the friends in this metaphor, Sam. It's about the friends we make along the way.
Oh, the movies are the friends. So, what are you, my friend? Is that how it works? Or do you remember colleague?
We're kind of like an omnipotent kind of being in an ephemeral sense. It's complicated.
It's complicated. Yeah. Well, I think that's probably.
Well, here's to another 300 episodes, Sam, and then another 300 after that, and so on and so forth until one of us dies.
Exponentially. 300 endlessly. That's what we need to do. And I think
Should we just celebrate milestones of multiples of 300?
Yeah, so
900, 1200, 1500.
how many years would it take us to get to 1200? That's what I want to know. This seems like
10
a
or so?
10 or so, yeah, maybe.
No, way more than that. Yeah, it'd be like 15 years if we do one a week, which is what we're doing in a minute.
Good lord. Well, that's probably a good bar for us to hit. Until then, I think in the spirit of self-congratulations, let's give ourselves a really big round of applause. Let's fade up the music.
Out of that soundboard subscription.
Let's do it, and let's get the hell out of here. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Is that the most obnoxious outro we've ever done? I think it might be.
I'm not sure I'm sold on that music. I like the idea of picking a different one every week until we find one we like.
Okay.
I like that.
But the applause, right? We like the applause? Yeah?
It's fine.
End your movie with applause, just like George Lucas does every single time. We're still here.